What's up? I'm Jacob Blitzo, your Elixir Mentor, and welcome to another exciting episode of the Elixir Mentor Podcast. This is where we discuss everything related to Elixir, from interviews with enthusiasts, pioneers in the community, to innovative projects and libraries shaping Elixir's future. So let's get started. Today, I'm thrilled to have Alex Koutmos joining us. He's a passionate Elixir developer, creator of numerous Elixir libraries, and a published author. So Alex, welcome to the show, and thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me, Jacob. Appreciate it.
Why don't we kick this off with just kind of who you are and what your background is that led you into the Elixir space?
Yeah, sounds good. It's a bit of a long story, but I think it was 2006, 2007. I went to school for software engineering, got out of software engineering and went to computer science. And, there I did a lot of C, C++, Java, the early 2000s university languages.
Java, the worst.
Public static void main.
Yeah, not to interrupt you, but I actually started a master's program for software engineering, and it was all Java. I hated it, and I dropped out.
It's such a bad language. It's such a bad language. Are we getting too spicy too early?
No. I think this is a great way to start off a live stream. Keep hating on Java.
But C, C++, Java. I didn't have any point of reference, so those languages seemed fine to me at the time. Eventually stuck around and did my master's in computer science. I actually focused on computer graphics, so did a lot of OpenGL, did a lot of ray tracing, kind of a lot of the abstract and theory parts of computer graphics. And then after that, got a job at Amazon and was working with Java full time as my job. Did that for about 2 years.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah, right. I decided that the big multinational corporation wasn't the place for me. So after a stint at Amazon for 2 years, I kind of switched to startups. Dabbled in a few languages depending on what startup I was at. Like one was PHP, another one was Python. Can't remember. I think those are those kind of big languages I did back then. Did a lot of front end work, so Angular 1, jQuery back in the day.
Okay.
And that's how long I've been programming now. But after a good amount of time in PHP and Python and even some Node apps, I was just unhappy with what I was working with day to day. And I remember there were 2 books from Manning. That's usually I either look for a book from Prague or Manning, but there were 2 books from Manning that I picked up. One was Go in Action, because Go was gaining in popularity, and the promise there was kind of like concurrency is a first-class citizen. It's baked into the language. Your life will be way better. And the other one, I think, was Elixir in Action, the first edition from Sasha Urek. And I was like, you know what? I'm unhappy with Python and PHP and Node.js because the concurrency story just, it's pretty abysmal. At least it was back in the day. I don't know, maybe things have gotten better now. But with PHP, you had Apache in front of your PHP app, so concurrency was kind of like you're at the whims of the Apache web server. Python, you got the GIL, and then Node, you have the event loop, right? So, can you do concurrency? Sure, but don't do too much work, or else your whole app is hosed by some edge cases due to the runtime. So, all those languages were not really appealing to me at the time. Read the 2 books, so Go in Action and Elixir in Action, and it should be obvious which one I picked at the end of the day.
Yeah.
But,
what year? When did the first version of the Elixir in Action book come out? Do you remember?
I think I read that book 2015.
Okay.
Let me take a look. Elixir in
Action. 2015 sounds right. I think it's right around there.
Yeah, let me see. When did it come out? Yeah, May 2015. So I read it just as it came out, I suppose. Yeah.
Okay, nice. That's such a good book. I think that was one of my first ones, and then also, um, uh, I'm spacing on the title, but one of Bruce Tate's books as well. But I
Was
didn't
it the one with the bees on the cover?
that the OTP one. That was definitely one of them. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I didn't really get into the Elixir space until like 2020. So,
Hmm.
and it was because I had a buddy telling me, dude, you need to check out Elixir. It's so good. You're going to love it. And that was like, I was in the Node.js world, JavaScript and TypeScript. And I was like, dude,
Yeah, yeah.
I'm sure I will, but I don't have time. And then I finally had a project that was a personal project of mine, and it made sense to look into Elixir. And so
Hmm.
that started my journey. And now I don't ever want to do anything else.
Yeah, like I mean, that was the thing. At 2015, I read that book. Some parts didn't make sense because it was like a totally brand new paradigm to me, right? Coming from Java, PHP, Python, very much OO languages. So there was a lot of ramp up and getting used to with a lot of these functional programming and what's OTP, and I've never heard of this stuff before. But like after you get a grasp of all these things, it really is tough to go back.
Well, yeah, at least for me, when I first started programming, object-oriented programming was so hard for me to wrap my head around. It took me a really long
Mhm.
time to understand it. And then like with functional and like immutability, it's just how my brain works, and I think it's how like programming should be done.
Yeah, it's way more intuitive. Like after you unlearn the OO stuff, functional
Yes.
programming is far more intuitive.
I mean, my learning curve with unlearning was very difficult, and it actually is what inspired me to start my YouTube channel, because I was like, if there's
Mhm.
anything I can do to help people like get started faster, that'd be like I rewrote my API so many times
Mhm.
because I started doing things just wrong. I would do things, the object oriented way versus taking advantage of what Elixir actually gives you.
Yeah, yeah, for sure, for sure. Yeah, and like looking back on some of these OO principles, where you have a class and you could hide some fields, and it's you do your data hiding and your encapsulation there. It's like it looks good on paper, but then in practice, when you have these systems where, like, I'll give you a good example from Amazon. There was a team that had like another library that we had to use internally, and they owned the library, and like there was just one field that just there was no getter and setter for it, and like it became this whole bureaucratic mess of like reaching out to this other team. Hey, you own this package. Can you just like expose this one field via getter and setter because we need it? And it's like you don't have these problems in Elixir because everybody gets all the data. You do whatever you want to, and it's all immutable, and everyone's happy.
Just make it global so we can mess with it from
Yeah,
every single class that we want access from.
yeah. And yeah. Once you start building like systems with functional languages, you feel more confident in what you build. There's less edge cases of, hey, this random function somewhere changed the object underneath us because everything's passed by reference as opposed to passed by value, and like these aren't like you get rid of a whole class of problems.
Yeah, I
It's
think it kind
a
of
much better world.
it kind of forces you to do things properly,
Yeah.
which is really hard when you first start.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So so I know you have two books published, or do you have more than that?
So I have the book from Prague, the building a weather station with nerves and Elixir.
Okay.
And then wrapping up Elixir Patterns now. And then we have a third book in the mix. So me and Hugo are gonna, work on the Elixir side, and then I've wrote my older brother into writing a lot of the finance stuff. So we're gonna write a financial analytics book using Elixir,
Okay.
and that'll be coming out like beta in a few months, I'm
Okay,
thinking. So
nice.
my older brother right now is doing all the financial stuff. So
You've
I
been
first need to read the book to figure out what the heck I'm going to program.
okay. You've been busy, right? You've been because Elixir Patterns is also still in beta, correct?
Yeah, there's just 2 chapters left, and the
Okay.
second to last one is almost done. I've got all
Okay.
the code written. I'm working on all the explanations. I
Okay.
suppose
So
people need explanations for code.
I read 6 chapters. Is that all that's out currently? or am I
I
missing?
think so. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's 6 chapters. Yeah.
So I want to really dive into the Elixir Patterns book because one, it's really good. But before that, when you first decided to write a book, so you wrote one with the Nerves project, and which is like kind of IoT stuff, right? What made you want to write your first book, and what made you pick that subject?
So I'd say that both those questions are answered, but I didn't make any of these decisions. Bruce Tate reached out to me and said if I want to join the project with him and Frank Hunleth, and I was like, yeah, of course. That's a no-brainer. Of course, I'll join you guys.
Nice.
And so I had no say on the topic. Like, they already started working on it, and I'm obviously not going to say no to Frank and Bruce. So I joined on.
Bruce is awesome. I just had him on last week, and he's very entertaining, and he can just tell stories forever.
He's got plenty. Yeah, he's got plenty of stories, and he's a book machine. I don't know how he publishes so many books.
Yeah, well, it sounds like you're getting there. You have like basically 2 underway at the same time right now.
Trying.
So you got asked to join the Weather Station book. What were your contributions to it? What were your pieces of that book?
Yeah, I'd say like maybe like the halfway point and beyond. A lot of that was kind of my a lot of my design, because I pulled in Grafana. I think time scale DB was the time series database of choice in that project. So I kind of pulled in a lot of my know-how from my monitoring experience and observability experience, and added that to the project, so that as you're pulling sensor data, you actually push it to the appropriate data store, so you can query it later and visualize it later and stuff like that.
So
coming into it?
Oh no, go ahead.
I was coming into it. Frank and Bruce had put together a lot of the Nerves bits, and then I added a very simple basic Phoenix backend to ingest the data from the Nerves device and then store that in timescale DB, and then display it with Grafana.
Okay, I was going to ask if you had much experience with any embedded software before.
Very little.
Okay.
Very little. But I think that goes to show how easy Nerves is to get up and running.
I need to make a good excuse to do a little IoT project, because in a past life I used to do automation for manufacturing processes. So but the programming is ladder logic. So you're dragging and dropping switches, timers and things. So super basic, but it's so much fun to pull the timing of multiple things together and build a machine that does something.
Oh yeah. It's got a different feel to it. When you actually make the LED go off, oh, I did that.
Yeah, I did machinery that could take your fingers off, so it was a little more nerve-wracking, but I learned a lot. Yeah. It was cool.
Higher stakes embedded programming.
Yeah, well, you learn so much about safety, like light curtains and things like that, and if you have anything that's spinning or a belt that you can get stuck in, if you don't have it fully guarded and you reach through the light curtain, it has to completely stop in a matter of certain amount of milliseconds, because if you can get to it and touch it and pull a fingertip off, that's an OSHA violation.
Yeah. I mean, always. So I do a little bit of woodworking as well, and anytime I get the table saw out, I know what you're talking about. There's a party that's wow, I could lose my entire hand.
My dad's a big woodworker, and it's one of those hobbies. I'll be ready for it maybe when I'm ready to retire.
Yeah.
But some of the safety systems that they're the braking systems on table saws, if it touches any moisture from your skin, it stops and almost doesn't even cut you anymore.
SawStop, I think, is the company. Yeah, they're expensive saws.
I'm
sure.
I
want to keep my fingers.
I have a grandpa that lost his fingertip when I was younger on a table saw.
Yeah. See,
Yeah.
I feel like everybody knows somebody that had a table saw accident. I
Yeah.
just don't want to be that person.
Don't be that person. You need your fingers. Imagine how hard it would be to type with just like 7 fingers.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a little bit of relearning that has to happen there.
You'd have to take all your bad habits that you already have on a keyboard and shift them even worse.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. So Elixir Patterns. This is not your typical design patterns book. I was expecting, coming from an object-oriented world where I've read a lot of design pattern books like, singleton, builder patterns, adapter, like all these patterns that you're used to, which are usually extremely boring books, but so important for, organizing code and building things that are scalable and expandable, right? But you didn't really take that approach with this book, and it threw me off at first. But I really love what you did, and I feel like you really just went and you leveraged what Elixir and Beam have to already solve our problems. And I would say it's like more or less about patterns and more about just using your tools correctly. Would you agree with my little like summary of the book?
That is a perfect summary. Yeah. There's not a lot of like abstract Gang of Four style patterns. It's very much like how do we take OTP, because there are tons of tools in there, more than you can actually cover in a single book, but there's so much in there. How can we take those constructs that we have available to us and build some really nice tooling for our existing applications?
Yeah. I really like when I first started reading it, I was like, okay, this is weird. Like you kind of start off with the like Erlang standard library and you touch on, really basic, like immutable data structures that you have available to you with Erlang that, and like from me, I always forget about leveraging Erlang in projects. So I feel like it was already like a really good reminder to think about Erlang more when you're building things in Elixir, right? Like you kind of go into, your different collections and things like that. And I feel like the whole time I was reading your book, it reminded me of things that you kind of are familiar with, but you forget in your daily practice when you're just coding.
Yeah. That I felt like the first couple chapters were very much like lay the foundation, non-process related stuff, all immutable stuff, right? No side effects. So covering like, what the Q module is, covering, a lot of the other different collections, like those are all important because they lay the foundation for the rest of the book. Because things like the Q module are super, super handy. And I think I'm looking up here my index page here for the book. But yeah, like in chapter 7, what I'm working on right now, I go over like writing rate limiters using GenServers, dynamic supervisors, registries, stuff like that. And once you hit your rate limit, you need somewhere to put those requests. The Erlang Q module, perfect place for it. And you just have that as like the state of your GenServer. So yeah, the first part of the book is let's all kind of ramp up on all the things that we're going to use later on in the book.
Yeah, I really enjoy how you explain things too. Like for everyone listening, this is a book. One, read the whole thing. So like when I read technical books, I read them twice. Like, so I know you have the like a live book workbook that goes with it, so you can play around and try examples. But when I read technical books, I always like read it through because I feel like then it prepares you. You know what's in the book, and like I don't really code along, but I'll read the code examples, make sure I understand what's happening, and then like I have a good broad view of what's in this book. And then when you want to like break down and go to more specific things, I'll go back to specific sections and do code alongs. And that's kind of like how I always break it down for myself at least. And what I like about that is because like you get into very useful examples when you get into processes and GenServer and supervisors. And I think that's kind of where your title starts to make sense, right? Elixir Patterns, because
Yes.
you explain how to leverage GenServers and supervisors and partition and like horizontal scaling with supervision trees. And I feel like that is a very difficult subject to kind of like wrap your head around, especially when you're new to Elixir and like the Beam ecosystem.
Mm-hmm.
But being able to leverage those things are just so powerful.
Oh yeah, I think that like when you're starting off learning Elixir and a little bit of Erlang here and there, you can get really far without ever touching like the OTP bits of it. You may go years without ever touching a GenServer, writing it yourself, just because a lot of the tooling that we have available to us builds on those things and kind of abstracts them away for you. So you can just focus on writing a handler or a behavior, and you could ignore all the OTP bits. But once you learn to use those parts, you can do some really amazing things in your application. And I think that's that's a big shift. Like maybe you're beginner/intermediate and you don't really need the OTP constructs. But when you want to go from intermediate to advanced, then you got to lean on those things and you need to understand how they work. And then you could start writing your own libraries that other people put in their supervision trees and rely on. And like I feel like OTP is where beginner and advanced, that's where you make the shift.
Yeah, I agree, because I kind of feel like I didn't even touch on any OTP functionality for like 2 years when I first started learning Elixir. I built things.
You don't need it, yeah.
Yeah, I built things the way I was used to building them in like Node kind of, but from, a functional standpoint.
Yeah, exactly. Like early days Phoenix, you just had to write your controller callbacks, and that was it. No processes necessary. Obviously Phoenix under the hood uses a lot of these constructs, but it makes it really easy for you to consume it, which I feel like is nice, because then people new to the language have somewhere to start without this giant hurdle of understanding OTP and processes and stuff, because it is unique to the
it is. And I think one of the big problems, though, is that's one of the big shiny objects of Elixir, right? Mm-hmm. So like it's one of the big draw-ins that kind of like, because that's what originally got me very interested in building backends using Elixir. But I didn't even use that functionality for like a big portion of my learning curve. But I feel like a lot of people like to rush it and maybe also like use GenServers improperly, like because you could easily overuse a GenServer.
Oh yeah, you could very much abuse that functionality.
Yeah, like make everything a stateful process. Just go.
Yeah,
nothing could go wrong.
Yeah, which is I feel like it's one of those things where you need to know where it's applicable. Like if you need side effects and state, that's what you lean on, right? But if you don't, there's no reason why make it more complicated.
Can you think of any examples off the top of your head of abusing GenServers where you probably shouldn't use them?
I'm sure like a long time ago I probably abused the hell out of them. But like off the top of my head, the obvious one would be keeping some state in a GenServer where GenServer you could keep it in a GenServer, but maybe ETS is a better choice. Let's say it's read often and it's read from many different places. There's no reason to bottleneck it to a GenServer. But yeah, no, I can't think of anything off the top of my head that I've done recently.
Okay, well, and so you said ETS, right? Which is Erlang term storage. And can you want to explain that a little bit for people? Because I feel like that's also something people don't know how to really leverage when they first get started.
Yeah, sure. So if you guys are familiar with Sasha Urich's book, remember that famous table where he's got Redis in one of the rows, and then he's like, just use Erlang. What he's referencing there is ETS. ETS is just a key value store, built into the Beam. And you could store pretty much anything you want in there. And again, it's key value, so you can store a key and a value, and then you can look it up by key and get that data back. And then there's plenty of configuration that you can do with ets, and you can tune the read concurrency, the write concurrency, stuff like that.
And now that is one of the exceptions to the rule with Erlang too, right? Because it's mutable.
Yeah, those are some of the escape hatches. Like it's very much, I find it to be a very pragmatic functional language versus things like Haskell and Elm are like very purist.
Mm-hmm.
I find Erlang and by extension Elixir to be very pragmatic. So it's like, here are all the the pure functional bits, but we have a whole bunch of escape hatches for you because we realize you got to get your work done. So
that is true. So one thing, as I was reading your book, which I enjoyed it, I enjoy this section a lot. I have a hard time wrapping my head around how I would use like the digraph and things like that when you start, creating your like vertices and connecting them with edges, by or directional kind of paths between processes or functions, I suppose you would say. Mm-hmm. What is a good example to leverage graphs from like the Erlang standard library in like an Elixir project?
Yeah, so I actually built a workflow engine based on digraph a few years ago. I was at a healthcare company, but we essentially needed to give functionality to users to have like their own ETL flows for medical record comes in, they can perform these kinds of operations on them, and then they can send off that data or persist it or do whatever. So like if you're doing anything with workflow engines, digraph is a great tool for that. If you need to perform some amount of work where you have like dependencies in the work, it's a good way to organize the steps. Then you can do a topological sort, so then you're guaranteed that all subsequent nodes are executed with their dependencies resolved.
So are they, it's always executed like in order of like a workflow, kind of like a flow chart kind of?
If you do a topological sort.
Yeah. Okay.
And there, the digraph module has a ton of ways to kind of traverse the graph, because a graph at the end of the day is just the data structure.
Mm-hmm.
How you traverse it, what you get out of it, that's up to whatever you got to do.
And so like this is one of the many reasons I really enjoyed your book, because you bring a lot of concepts forward that like I feel like you touched on a lot of just the most important things that you should know as an Elixir engineer. And
that's what I tried to do. Yeah.
No, I think you did a really good job, because like I learned a lot, and then I was reminded of things a lot, and it makes you rethink the way you solve your problems on a daily basis. And mm-hmm. I enjoyed the way you laid things out, and just like using term storage too, and then the way you broke down like match specs as like SQL mm-hmm. queries, I think mm-hmm. that was huge. Because
match specs are like, if you're seeing those for the first time, they are confusing. That's a bear to understand, but I did my best to break it down.
You did really good,
and digestible as possible.
If you don't mind, you want to just explain what match specs are really quick?
Yeah, sure. So it's exactly what you said. It's kind of like an SQL query to get stuff out of ets. Like let's say you have a whole bunch of stuff in ets. You can write a match spec, and anything that fits that match spec, you'll get back as a result. So you can kind of think of it as like a match spec can contain like a where clause, and it's like, oh, I only want to get things, where, I don't know, this map key exists in the value. And so then you have access to like anything you have access to in guards, you have access to in match specs, and you can kind of do that on your data. But yeah, those are. Yeah, match specs are fun.
No, I love the way you broke it down, and then your examples just kind of like, finish, like, give you a good home run, like, because you read about it, right? And then your example, that's how you use it, the end.
Yeah. I feel like that's always a good way to start. Like you give the abstract theory and then you go to practice. Like I feel like if you don't do the practice part, you're never really going to understand it.
That is probably the hardest thing about ever reading a technical book, right? Because you always have to have your computer next to you because you have that. So that's why I like to read them first and then go back and reiterate over things that I want to make sure I understand. Because you don't ever fully understand something just reading through it.
Yeah. No, you really do need to play with it, which is why when I think Hugo approached and he wanted to work on something together, and this was the idea that I had at the time. I was like, yeah, let's do it together. It was actually his idea to incorporate Livebook, and thank God he had that idea because I think that adds a lot to this book. Like for a lot of the like supervision tree chapters and sections, rendering the supervision tree in Kino and showing graphs, like let's say I'm doing like a stress test, like having that visual feedback I think adds a lot to the book and makes it a lot easier for the reader to digest this information and understand it.
Yeah, no, I thought it was really good. We just got a question, and I know the answer, but I'm going to let you answer this. Does the beta book purchase include future provisions or revisions?
Yeah. If you buy now, you get the discount because you're buying early, and then as chapters come out, you automatically get the updates.
I highly recommend grabbing the book, guys. And yeah, you get emails every time a new update comes out, so you can just download the new version. It's one of those books. It just needs to be in your tool belt if you're an Elixir developer.
Yeah, and I'm not just saying this because I wrote the book with Hugo, but I do reference it pretty often because like a lot of these things, looking again here at the index, like a lot of times, I need a rate limiter implementation, or I need to write an init task for a supervision tree. I'm like, oh, I know I came up with a really good way and I wrote it in the book. I'm gonna go reference it again and look it up and just copy and paste it over.
No, I love that. I even like there was really, I don't feel like you needed to include it, but I'm really happy you did. But the crypto module from Erlang,
Oh yeah,
like just knowing, like obviously, like you usually use hash functions for, hashing passwords and things like that. And it's one directional encryption, but you go through, all the different formats from like symmetric to asymmetric, and you explain what they all are. And then you also go through examples on how to use them. And I think just in this day and age, everyone wants to know that their data is being, safely encrypted. So if your database gets hacked or, something nasty happens, your data is not just exposed in a readable format.
Yeah, and the crypto module is nice because you use it for a wide array of things. Like I said, let's say you need to hash a file to see if it's changed. The crypto module's got your back. Let's say you're using Stripe or a Paddle or whatever for payments processing. When you get a webhook, you usually get a HTTP header that has like a signature key, and usually those things use an HMAC to validate that the payload, given your secret key that you've configured in Paddle or Stripe or whatever, HMAC that with the payload. If you get the value that's in your HTTP header, that's a valid payload that got sent to you, right? Because those endpoints are wide open all the time. They have to be. There's no way for Stripe to hit you unless those endpoints are open on the open internet.
I was gonna.
So you need to make sure that data coming in is legitimate, or else you're hosed.
I was going to say, like using Stripe webhooks or webhooks from any service, really, you're always you have to do the authentication to make sure it's coming from the right source. And I kind of just always blindly followed documentation and never really understood what I was doing. And just the way you break it down, it's a good little high level view of this is how it works and this is how you use it. And it gives you that much deeper of an understanding of why you do those things when you have a wide open webhook on your back end.
And sometimes the problem is, like, I love Elixir. Sometimes the vendors don't have like an Elixir library like for whatever service it is, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I know we have Stripe for Stripe, but there are a bunch of other payments processors. Like I don't think Paddle has an Elixir client library. So every once in a while, like you have to do this stuff yourself. You know, you need to know that the crypto module exists. You need to know what an HMAC is. Sometimes you got to write your own plug.
Yeah, you have to get very used to writing your own code because unfortunately, Elixir does miss a lot of libraries that would be nice to have, but it's slowly getting there.
I must say though that sometimes the libraries are not as good as you think. Like I think the Stripe, actually the Node.js package, they have like an automatic validation for the webhooks. Like you just call a function. It's like, does this payload match my configured signature or whatever? And in their documentation, they say, make sure that you do a secure compare, or else you can do a timing attack. If you look at the Node.js implementation, they don't do a secure compare. So in Elixir, we use was a plug. I think there's a plug function called I think it's like plug secure compare. It's a plug secure compare. Yeah, it's plug.crypto.secure compare. And that'll make sure that you mitigate the whole timing attack issue. But yeah, sometimes you can't trust the libraries.
Yeah, I mean that is true, and overusing dependencies and libraries can be very dangerous too.
Yeah,
if they're not very active and a lot of people aren't using them, they're probably not tried and tested enough.
Yeah.
But even like Node.js,
this is the Stripe.
Yeah,
this is the Stripe JavaScript library. So
that's kind of scary. Well, it's also like I talk about this all the time, and it could be fixed by now, but I don't think it is. But if you use the Postgres Docker image, the main one that Postgres has, if you don't change the default username and password, there's a
Postgres.
There's a Trojan on it. You start like a miner that takes all your resources, starts mining on it.
Oh yeah. If the port is open to the internet, like 100 requests will come in immediately to 5432. And start checking like all the default creds.
Yep. So don't use default credentials.
It's happened to me.
It happened to me on a development server where I was just kind of like spinning things up really quickly to get something tested. And I was like, what is going on? Why is my droplet at 90% resources? And that's when I discovered what it was. Yep.
Same exact thing happened to me. It was on DigitalOcean, so I had a droplet, and I was playing around and stuff. And I was like, let me see. Let me just spin up Postgres. Let me spin up this dummy Phoenix app, and same exact thing happened to me within like 2 days.
Yeah, and I feel like it's a consistent amount of time that passes for when it starts.
Yeah, well, you don't need a lot of time to scan the entire IP range of the world.
Yeah, that's true.
Everyone just has bots running, and they're just...
It's kind of like, do you remember when GitHub Actions was first released? It was abused, and people started just spinning up and using GitHub's resources to mine crypto. Yeah. Oh, man.
Oh, yeah. Good times.
Yeah. It's always entertaining, but you're also thankful it's not your project it's happening to.
Yeah, that's true.
But yeah, so this book, highly recommend. It's one of those books that needs to be on your bookshelf, and you're going to reference it all the time because it just,
thank you.
It goes through all the main. I really like how you break down the enum module too from the Elixir library. Just from like cleansing, massaging, and summarizing data. I like the way you went through and demonstrated how to use like the filter, map, and reduce functions.
I feel like the enum module is probably one of the most written about modules. But one thing I've never seen before, which is what I did in this book with Hugo, was kind of bucketize the various functions and when do you apply them. And so if you think about a lot of the problems you're trying to solve is just transporting data from via your pipeline or from function to function, like how can I lean on the enum module, and what functions do I kind of look for if I have to clean data, if I have to aggregate it, if I have to do whatever to it. So I feel like that's a unique take, and maybe it's a hit, maybe it's a miss, but it sounds like you liked it. So
I thought it was a hit. I thought it was good because I always have struggled with explaining how a lot of the enum module works. Like there are like, obviously like I know how to use the functions, but I never really thought about it in like those three categories. And I think that it really helps you kind of grasp like, well, what am I doing with this data? Okay. These are the functions I should be focusing on. And then you pick the right tool for the job.
Yeah, exactly.
I thought it was good. I like it.
Score.
So guys, go buy this book because I do think it's that once you know how to write Elixir and like you kind of had the main gist about it, you need this book.
And that was the intended audience. So like this is probably not your first book. If you're just getting to Elixir, don't buy the book. I feel like it's too much. And like I assume that I'm not going to go over the basic syntax. I kind of assume that you know that coming into the book. So if this is your first Elixir book, I feel like it'll be a terrible first book.
Yeah, no, get your basic grasp on Elixir and then go read this book, and I think it'll put you in a really good spot.
I apologize it's taken so long. My wife got really sick last year, and so like 2023 for me was just taking care of 3 kids and a sick wife.
Oh dang, that's rough.
I didn't touch it much last year, but things are getting back to normal.
I can't imagine, like, I don't know if I could write a book. I enjoy recording.
It's a labor of love.
I enjoy like recording videos, but I feel like writing a book is just so much harder than turning on a camera and talking.
Yeah, it's a lot of work. Like a lot of times I'll write like whole sections. I'm like, I don't like this. Delete, and I'll just blow it all away because I have a pretty high bar for what I want to give to people. Like people gave me their money, I want to make sure that they feel like they got value out of it. So if something doesn't hit my level of standard, I get rid of it and I'll rework it and rewrite it. So I take my time, make sure that people enjoy the final product.
Well, it's good, and I'm excited for how many chapters are there total when it's finished?
2 more chapters left.
So it'll be 8 chapters.
Yeah. 8
okay.
chapters.
Well, I'm excited for the next 2 because, it's good. It's good. I enjoy it.
Thank you.
Default said, well, now I have to read this as my first Elixir book. Challenge accepted. I have to read this book as my first. I mean, luck. If you already know Elixir without reading, you could read this book as your first Elixir book. Because I know a lot of people don't like reading technical books. They like to watch videos.
Yeah.
But
that's true.
But if you don't know Elixir, you should read another book first.
Yeah, there's a lot of good ones too. Like I think Sasha Yurko does a great job. Like I think he takes more of the approach of beginner to intermediate. I tried to go more intermediate to advanced.
Okay.
So I'd read Sasha Yurko's book first because that's how I learned back in 2015. So I'd read his book first again. That's
me too. Sasha does a great job. It's a good book.
Yeah. He's the OG of teaching Elixir.
He is.
So I would definitely start with that book, and then I would if you're interested, pick up my book.
We got another question rolling in. What was the main motivation to publish the book on your own instead of going with PragProg or another?
I kind of just wanted to try, self-publishing, see how it went. I had a great experience with PragProg. Would definitely publish a book with them again. But seeing as like Hugo wanted to do something together, and going to PragProg already with the team and being like, oh, we don't want your editors, we have Hugo as our editor. Like, I feel like it just made it too messy. Like, let's just self-publish.
Well, there's something about controlling your content, which is nice too, especially if you can make it work, right? Because then you get full proceeds of your book, and it allows you to write more books, and then you kind of you grow your own audience instead of relying on someone else's.
Yeah, I mean, just to give credit to Prog, they were super flexible. Any ideas I had for the Nerves book, they were like, yeah, good. You're the expert, you know.
Oh yeah, I'm
So
not trying to talk crap either, because I love Prog, and they have so many good books out there, and so many good published authors.
I have heard that from other publishers though, where they like the publisher is like kind of micromanage you on the content of the book. So yeah, some other ones are not so nice, but I had a great experience.
From what I've heard too, like I said, I'm not an author. I don't even plan to be, but from what I've heard, they kind of just, if they like who you are and they know you produce good content, you kind of just get to write whatever you want.
Yeah, that was my experience.
Yeah, that's awesome. No, I love that.
Yeah.
What's been your experience with self-publishing? Any learning curves? Yeah,
it's been fun. So we use ConvertKit to do all of our sales and stuff like that. Yeah, it's been a bit of learning, because if you don't market it, the nice thing with Prog is they send out the weekly emails. They have their own Twitter channel, and they post there, and they they do a lot of that work for you. So you have to do that if you want to push the book.
Yeah,
you got to push it.
On Twitter, they have an audience of 25,000 people too.
Yeah. So,
but that's how I discovered your book, from one of your tweets. So
yeah, I used to run the daily tweets. That was a lot of work, so I had to dial back on the daily tweets.
I try to publish content every day, and it is a lot of work, and it takes a lot away from your day job, getting actual things done.
Yeah, it's a balance you got to strike. I used to just schedule out 30, 40 tweets, but then if people have questions, then you got to go. It's like an implicit support that you have to do, and it was nice. I enjoyed doing it. I feel like a lot of people got a lot of value out of those, but yeah, it's a good amount of work.
Marketing is hard.
Yeah, you don't appreciate it until you have to do it.
You don't. It's the hardest thing. I really enjoy building things and creating things, but then to get attention to what you've done is the hardest part, in my opinion.
Oh yeah, and I mean that goes with everything too. Let's say you make an open source library, getting people to use it is a lot of work.
Yeah, imagine being like Jose and getting awareness of Elixir from day one.
Yeah.
Hardest thing in the world.
Oh yeah, I mean he's been at it since 2012.
2012, I think. Yeah, somewhere. It's either 11 or 12.
He's been at it for 12 years, and I feel like he still has to justify it to certain communities. Oh, why would you do Elixir?
Yeah.
I feel like he's still fighting the same battles he did 7-8 years ago.
Well, that's because the tech communities are they're so against change and moving outside of their wheelhouse.
Yeah.
I will say though, the Elixir community is a lot more open-minded than your JavaScript or Node.js groups. I might get a text for saying that, but
I think the Elixir ecosystem strikes a good balance.
Yeah.
I'll say problem, but one of the problems with the JavaScript community is everybody's writing the same thing over and over and over again. There was Express, then there was I remember. Then Walmart had their own framework for writing web apps, and then there's 50 web app frameworks for Node, and half of them get abandoned every other week. And it's
yeah,
we just have Phoenix, and we're all happy. I think there are a couple of other ones too, experimental web frameworks.
There's some
not
projects,
to discount those.
There's some projects that are pretty cool coming out, Svelte view, or I am being dyslexic and turning things around, but
I know the library you're talking about. I don't remember the name of it, but I know what you're talking about.
Live Svelte, perhaps.
Yeah, X. Live Svelte X or something.
Yeah, but Wout was on, and he started that, and it's cool. It's there's some cool projects going out there, and I think it's Tony. Tony just released like a YouTube video where he made a to-do list that has offline support using LiveSpelt, which is really cool because
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, LiveSpelt. We got it in the comments. See, that's why
Nice.
doing live stuff is so awesome because we can be here and have our brain farts and we get corrected. So yeah, I put Alex's website in the description below. Go check out his book. But like you also have built quite a few Elixir libraries.
Yeah.
What?
Quite a few here.
I want to pull up. I have to pull up your website because I already.
Yeah, I'm pulling up Hex because I forgot half of them.
All right, let's see. Open source.
I think the more popular one is, or the most popular ones are the monitoring ones. So I have a library called Prometheus.
Okay.
And that one's, I'm trying to think of a good elevator pitch for it. It essentially takes care of all of your metrics for you in one library. So as long as you're using Grafana and Prometheus, so it's opinionated in that regard.
Okay.
But what it does is, it's a plugin-based library, so you only pull in the plugins that are relevant for your project. And what I painstakingly did was I went through all of the libraries that I support, so like Phoenix and Oben and Absinthe and LiveView, and I looked at all the telemetry events that those libraries produce, and then I generated a crap ton of Prometheus metrics that are derived from those telemetry events. And then I can't remember the name of the project. There was another project in the like Erlang telemetry group. I think it was like Prometheus Core or something. But all the Prometheus metrics get consumed by Prometheus Core, and then it generates that /metrics endpoint that Prometheus can hit.
Okay, nice. And all the dashboards and everything are just there?
Yep. That's awesome. So making writing all the metrics was a lot of work because you need to take just raw telemetry events and figure out, okay, what's useful to put in a dashboard. And then after I had all the Prometheus metrics formatted and generated, I made accompanying Grafana dashboards for every single plugin. So there's an Absinthe plugin, Absinthe plugin and dashboard, Oben plugin and dashboard, Phoenix plugin and dashboard. And then I also tie into the Grafana HTTP API, and Prometheus will take care of publishing those dashboards for you when the application starts. And it also bundles in Grafana agents, so if you need to do a remote write. So the way Prometheus works is it'll make an HTTP call to the service. It'll hit like /metrics or whatever you configure, and it takes that raw like definition of metrics and puts it in the time series database. But let's say Prometheus can't access that endpoint over the public internet or something. Let's say they're on two different networks. You could do what's called remote writing. And so then your application can actually take that time series data and push it to a Prometheus instance.
That's awesome. I'm going to have to check this out.
That gets bundled in here. Yeah, that's a lot of work, that library.
I love that. You have a lot here. How hard is it to keep them all up to date and active?
It depends on the libraries. Like some of my favorites that don't change often is Unplug. And that one you can conditionally unplug plugs.
Oh, that's such a cool idea.
From your like endpoint.ex file. So that one is really handy. I had a problem at a company that I was working at. The DevOps team yelled at us because like logs were blowing up with like any time Prometheus was hitting instances.
Wait a second. You can't have too many logs. No, I'm just kidding.
But yeah, so that's where that idea came. I was like, I want to conditionally unplug these plugs. Like, I don't want logs to get produced for certain endpoints. And
that's really cool.
I think in that README, I actually have that exact example where it's like, I gotta look now. It's been a while. Yeah. So you do plug unplug, and then you have an if statement where it's like, given the predicate, and then some arguments to the predicate do the actual plug that you wanted to do. So in the example, I have like unplug the telemetry plug if the request path is health checker endpoint or health checker or metrics.
That's super useful.
Yeah, I love this library, but the nice thing is I don't have to keep it up to date. It's like it's done.
What is replug?
It did its job. It does it well. So replug, similar to unplug, can be used to configure the options for a plug at runtime. So if you look at the plug behavior, there's those two functions. It's init and call, if I recall correctly. The init function is not supposed to have like any side effects or anything like that, because at compile time, it'll actually take the value of init and it'll just pass it to call automatically when you're running. So you're not reevaluating that init callback every single time in production. Once in a while, though, rare instances, you need to edit that at runtime. I think the example I give was like cores or something. Like there's a couple libraries in the Elixir ecosystem that didn't have any way to. It was Corsica.
Okay.
To change the to change those things, but you need to change them at runtime. So it essentially breaks that behavior where it pre-computes the init callback, and for that one plug in replug, it'll always call init because it needs to recompute.
That's very cool. Nice little useful tools.
Yeah, that one's fun. Unplug is my favorite though. I use that everywhere.
I'm gonna have to check out Unplug because that seems super useful for me.
Anytime I start a project, I always pull it in because it doesn't matter where you're running, you're gonna get health checks and you're probably gonna get metrics, and your DevOps team will hate you if you have like 10 services and they're all getting health checked every 5 seconds.
Yeah, we have a. Oh, sorry. I was gonna say, speaking of DevOps, you have another book idea that someone wants. Jose goes, have you ever thought to publish a book, maybe a guide on how to apply DevOps for an Elixir project? Because for me, there's a lack of content in this area.
Yeah, I just try to pull in as much stuff as possible into the application. That's my solution to DevOps.
DevOps it's a career path of its own. Like there's a lot to know with DevOps. It's not always the easiest, most straightforward. Because if you wrote a book on how to deploy in DevOps, you'd have so many people disagreeing with you and want you to do it different ways.
Yeah, well, there's so much tooling there. Like if you go to the what's CNCF? If you go to like their giant map of like all the DevOps tools in the cloud native, is the CNCF? Cloud Native Computing Foundation. If you look at that giant map, there's just so much there. So if you were to write a book, number one, you can't cover all these technologies in there. Number two, you're gonna have to be opinionated to like show people how you do DevOps.
Yeah. And
you're gonna piss somebody off.
Oh,
someone's gonna disagree with you. There's no two ways around it.
My DevOps ability, I'm smart enough to screw things up. But
fix them afterwards.
I would never want to publish too much information on how I do DevOps, because like if it's like too involved of a project, I always have to bring someone that specializes in it, because there's a lot that goes behind it.
Yeah, and I think to tie back to Sasha Urich's table where everything can just be replaced by Elixir. I do think that Elixir and Erlang make DevOps way easier because you're only deploying like a couple things. It's like Postgres and your app. And
That's true.
Pretty much done.
Yeah.
Like you don't need all the overhead of like Redis. And then you don't need a like if you use Open, right? That covers the majority of people's bandwidth. Like if you're getting if you're putting a whole bunch of stuff in Open, it'll probably cover your use case. Like you don't need to reach for anything like RabbitMQ or Nats or anything like that. So it's like the number of things you need to DevOpserize are
Bef-
way less.
Before I knew how to even use ets, I was using Redis for things, and you waste so many resources. And then
Yeah.
you basically have another database instance now that you have to worry about and maintain and keep secure.
It's one more thing.
Yep.
And like I feel like that's the DevOps stories. It's one more thing to maintain and manage and stuff
One more
like that.
thing.
So
Let's add to that nginx config file, right? Like,
yeah, that's
like how can we make this nginx setup the most confusing most confusing possible router ever? Keep adding systems to it.
yep, yeah, exactly. So I feel like if you buy into the Elixir ecosystem, it does actually make things a lot easier for you from a DevOps perspective.
Tamir said that there is a book in beta about the same topic, engineering Elixir applications. That's very cool. I'm gonna have to check that out. Do you know who wrote it? We'll see if that.
Oh, I do see it on Prague Prog.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Ops.
I'm gonna have to add that to my read list.
Yeah, I'm waiting for machine learning in Elixir to be out of beta.
Yeah,
I like physical books. I don't read digital books. I usually wait for them to hit print and then I'll buy it.
Yeah. I get really excited. I'm really bad at buying. I already bought that book, but I haven't started reading it. But I definitely need to, because I had Thomas Millar on, who's writing Instructor, and super smart dude. Like that was such a good conversation. But I went in like I'm so naive with like the machine learning and large language model stuff. Like it was like a mind explosion talking to him, and I was like, wow, I have so much to learn.
Yeah, that's a space I don't know much about either.
Yeah,
So
but
I'm hoping I could just read Sean's book and get up to speed.
Yeah, there you go. I'm gonna have to.
I can pivot to AI engineer senior.
The nonstop learning cycles of being a software engineer.
Oh yeah,
I enjoy it, but if you think about it too much, it can kind of be overwhelming.
Oh yeah, and you do need to find your specialties. Find what you enjoy, because computing is such a large space. Find
It
what you
really
enjoy,
is.
and there's enough space for you to drill down deep, like deeper than you ever think was possible.
Oh,
even,
for sure.
The smallest of niches.
Well, I always refused to get into front end web development. I hated it. I hate it. I mean, I shouldn't say I hate it, but I don't enjoy it as much as just
strongly dislike.
Yeah. And then I'm not going to say bullied, but my YouTube channel really wanted me to make Phoenix Live View stuff. And so I like forced myself to start learning Live View. And I'm grateful that I have been learning it, because it is a very useful tool. Even if you're just building like dashboards and like admin stuff, you should be able to throw together some front end web applications, you know?
Oh, Liveview is amazing. That's actually this is my company that I bootstrapped.
Oh, nice.
It's a Liveview app.
What is it? What do you do?
So we're in the auto body space. We provide estimating and materials management and invoicing for auto bodies. If you get into a car accident, hopefully nobody here gets into a car accident. But if you get into a car accident and it's got to go to a shop, they need to estimate, labor and parts that need to be replaced. And there are other, applications in the space that do that. But nobody really took into account like the consumables that you have to use to repair a vehicle. So like sandpaper and tapes and papers and stuff like that. So we built me and my brother. He's my other brother. He's an auto body guy. And we've kind of taken his understanding of fixing, chassis and cars, and we've digitized all that learning into a Liveview app. And so we have quite a few customers that use Eagle MMS for estimating based on their standard operating procedures, what materials they're going to use, what kind of paints, how expensive are those paints, the surface area of those paints on, any given panel. So, yeah.
Look at you. You got projects going on with your whole family.
Yeah, I'm pulling everybody in.
I love that.
Yeah, so the older brother is the finance and economics brother, and that's who I'm writing the book with.
Can you explain that book a little in a little greater detail for everyone?
Yeah, sure. So I teased about it maybe like a month or so ago, and he's actually working on it now. But it's going to be about how to use like a lot of the tools in the NX ecosystem. So Explorer, NX, Scholar, stuff like that, and Livebook, of course, and how to perform logistic regressions, linear regressions, how to analyze financial data. And my brother's coming up with that portion because I don't have any insight into that. And then he's going to come up with these models and how to analyze financial data. And then I'm going to plug in the portion where it's like, okay, these are the APIs that you can hit that are free. Let's capture all this data. Let's feed all these things through some NX modules or Explorer modules, and make sense of the data, and then plot it with Vega Lite in Livebook. So the idea is nothing about finance, but Elixir. Let's now ramp you up on some I'd say basic finance and intermediate finance concepts, and then how to use your Elixir skills to analyze the markets and stuff.
I love that, and I also hate that I have another book to buy.
Yeah. I have to finish. So he's writing that one asynchronously because obviously there's a lot to talk about with finance to get Elixir people up to speed on what they're analyzing, what they're measuring. So he's writing that. He's like 50, 60 pages in, which should line up with me finishing off Elixir Patterns.
Okay.
To immediately have no break to write the next book.
Yeah, just go hard until you burn out. No.
Yeah, that's my life motto.
I love it. No, that book sounds super useful. I think it'll be an informative book. I'm excited to see it because I have not read your Nerves book. But I really enjoy your writing style for your Elixir Patterns book. So
appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, we've been going for over an hour, so I guess we can wrap this up. If anyone has questions before we wrap this up for Alex, you can get them now. Other than that, I really appreciate you making the time, and it was awesome to meet you and talk to you about
likewise
all the projects that you're doing. And I love that, I really wanted to have your book read before this conversation. So it forced me to kind of rush through it, but I'm so thankful because there's so many good little gold mines in this book, just awesome little tips that you kind of pick up on. And if you're too isolated as a developer, you sometimes aren't thinking outside of your own wheelhouse, and it's good to have other people's perspectives to solving problems.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. That was very much the intention, so I'm glad that we hit the mark.
No, yeah, you nailed it. It's such a good book. And again, thank you. And if you have any closing remarks or if you want to plug any of your projects, please let everyone know.
Yeah, no, Twitter's probably or X rather. I still keep calling it Twitter.
I call it Twitter too.
Yeah, that's probably the best place to follow. Yeah, I mean, if you want to follow me on GitHub, you can probably see all the open source stuff that I release. A lot of it comes from the business I'm building with my younger brother. So anytime I could find something that could be its own library and it's useful for everybody, I'll rip it out of the Eagle MS code base and make it open source. So.
Nice. I love that. I need to be better at doing that because I have not done that, but I feel like it's nice to provide libraries that are useful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, that's it. GitHub and Twitter are probably the two best places. And follow my blog, although I've been absent from writing on the blog.
Dude, blogs are hard. I would much rather just talk at a camera, like I said. I'll be the idiot live and worry about people hating on me later. It's easier.
Yeah. Well, the problem was when I was really active on the blog, I didn't have any books to write. But now, my writing is the books.
Yeah, I'm sure, you can only balance so much. But definitely check out Alex's blog. Buy his book. Elixir Patterns because it's just an essential tool. I think it's such a good book. And I want to thank everyone for tuning in. I think we got a good amount of viewers live, and I love seeing that and a lot of active conversation. And I hope everyone has a good weekend, and I'll see you in the next live stream. And thanks again, Alex. It was awesome.
Thanks for having me.